that define our interests as students. It is my immense pleasure to welcome you all to the Dr. Chandran Devanesen Endowment Lecture. We have been blessed with the opportunity to have some amazing personalities and voices among us today. So let's celebrate the history and politics buff living inside you with some really rich insights and dialogue. Now, as MCCNs, we know that we always start our significant experiences and events with the blessings of God. On that note, I would like to invite Dr. Shiba, Associate Professor of the Department of History, to come forward and conduct the prayer. The floor is yours, ma'am. Thank you.
Please rise for the prayer. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful morning. Our hearts are filled with gratitude for making each one of us to be a part of this prestigious Madras Christian College, which empower young men and women with academic excellence, spiritual vitality, and social relevance. Bless our principal, faculty, and students with wisdom, courage, and compassion. We remember the contribution of Dr. Chandran Devanesen and Dr. Chiranjeevi Nirmal to the Department of History and the college. We thank you for all our retired professors' contribution for the development of the department. We are grateful for bringing Professor Mridula Mukherjee and Professor Aditya Mukherjee into our midst. Bless them with good health, happiness, and long life to contribute more to the intellectual development of our nation. Help us to have a meaningful time together. In Jesus' precious name I pray. Amen.
As we extend our gratitude to all who is present here, we shall start the day with a welcome address presented by none other than the head of the Department of History, Dr. Venkata Ramanujam, sir. Sir, I request you to take the floor.
Thank you. A very good morning to all present here. It gives me great pleasure to extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you who have gathered here to listen to this year's Dr. Chandran Devanesen Endowment Lecture and Dr. Chiranjeevi J. Nirmal Endowment Lecture. In the first session, we will have the Dr. Chandran Devanesen Endowment Lecture delivered by renowned historian Professor Mridula Mukherjee, formerly Professor of Modern Indian History at the Center for Historical Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Following a short tea break, we'll have the Dr. Chiranjeevi J. Nirmal Endowment Lecture delivered by esteemed historian Professor Aditya Mukherjee, formerly Professor of Contemporary History at the Center for Historical Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. First and foremost, let me welcome our respected guests of honor, distinguished historian, and I can proudly say my teachers, Professor Mridula Mukherjee and Professor Aditya Mukherjee, to this to our college, to both of whom have graciously agreed to deliver the endowment lectures. Thank you, sir. You are welcome. Thank you, ma'am. Welcome for this to our college and department. We are indeed greatly will benefited and blessed by your presence here. We are privileged to have you amongst us, and let me take this opportunity to thank you also for having come. I extend a warm welcome to former head of the department, Professor Don Stanley, my teacher, Selva Kumari Madam, our former professor, Dr. C.J. Barnabas, sir, our alumni and very good friends of our college, Dr. Selvanathan, Father Aragyaswamy, sir, and I think more friends are coming. Let me also welcome our former head of the Department of Philosophy, Dr. Joshua. Sir is graciously present here. He immediately, the moment I said we are having this endowment lectures, immediately said I'm posting it in the former professors group. Some of them will be coming. Guests who have come here, professors from MCC, from our own department, former professors, the professors from other colleges, all of you, I extend a very warm welcome to each and every one of you. In fact, I extend a very special welcome to the distinguished alumni whom I have mentioned, whom I have not seen, who also may not have been part of here, but they have been a pillar of strength for the department. In fact, these endowments are a result of their efforts and contribution, and it's because of their efforts that has borne fruit today as these endowment lectures. Most importantly, I extend a warm welcome to all my dear students, students from other departments, students from other colleges, research scholars, and guests. Once again, I extend a very warm welcome to one and all. Let me not stand between you and the lecture. Thank you all. Thank you. Apart from the welcome, I normally do that. It's very important for us to know why these endowments have been instituted. So, as we are going to now have the Dr. Chandran Devanesen Endowment Lecture, let me say a few words about it. We'll also see a short film on him. When I invited Dr. Dayalan Devanesen, son of Dr. Chandran Devanesen, he immediately, he's here, but unfortunately he's in another engagement, but he conveyed his wishes to us. And he also shared a short film on Dr. Chandran Devanesen to know about his contributions. Before that, let me read a few words about it, about Dr. Chandran Devanesen, former head of the Department of History, the first Indian principal of MCC, and founder, vice chancellor of Northeastern Hill University, in whose name we have this endowment. Now, this is a small piece that has been published in a souvenir brought out during the centenary celebrations of Dr. Chandran Devanesen. I'll read a few extracts from it. Educationalist extraordinaire of post-independence era, he remains a legend. He was a beautiful blend of teacher, historian, lay theologian, poet, playwright, social worker, and an educational administrator. Born on 1st November 1917 in Palayam Gotai, Dr. Chandran Devanesen had his primary education in Chennai and his secondary schooling in Kingswood College, Kandy in Ceylon. He graduated from Selwyn College, Cambridge between 1936 and 39 and had his post-graduation from Selly Oak College, Birmingham, 1939-40. His academic achievements were crowned with a doctorate from Harvard University in 1962 for his thesis, The First 40 Years of M.K. Gandhi, later published as The Making of the Mahatma in 1969. In the meantime, in 1946, after a brief stint as an assistant professor of history at the Bankura Christian College, Bengal, he had joined MCC as a professor in the Department of History. At MCC, graciously supported by his wife Savitri Devanesen, he gave a distinctive touch to the Department of History as its head between 1946 and 62, to life at Bishop Heber College as warden, and to the activities of the student Christian movement. Appointed principal of the college in 1962, Devanesen was a worthy successor to his illustrious educational missionary predecessors. The Devanesen years, that is 1962 to 1973, were charged with dynamic revitalization and rapid expansion of the college as there was progress in various fields, be it academic, outreach programs, or community development. Dr. Chandran Devanesen was not merely a visionary, but also a pragmatist, an activist who knew how to translate his dreams into reality. New courses like PG in political science, public administration and statistics, and undergraduate courses in Tamil and commerce were started during his time. The foundations for new amenities were laid as he initiated the setting up of a post office, student guidance service, students records office, and alumni and public relations office, archives, children's park, and so on. The 6 houses and 6 flats for staff, the international guest house, PG block, student center, women's hostel, farm, family life institute, pavilion, Pulicat Biological Center, McPhail Arts Center, and the Rural Service League School were built during his tenure. He encouraged the staff to work towards the future, the development of MCC in a developing India. As an administrator, Dr. Devanesen attempted to be a friend and a guide and was not a mechanical guardian of rules and regulations. In 1970, Dr. Devanesen was awarded Padma Shri by the Indian government for his outstanding contributions to the field of education. In October 1970, the government of India invited him to join the Indian delegation to the 16th General Conference of UNESCO at Paris. He also served as a member of the UGC and a syndicate member, University of Madras. Dr. Devanesen was nominated by the Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, to serve on the subcommittee on communalism of the National Integration Council. He was also member of the expert committee appointed by the Defense Ministry, member National Sports Council, and was the first Asian to deliver the Cato lecture in Australia. In 1973, he became the founder Vice Chancellor of Northeastern Hill University at Shillong. He returned to Madras in 1978 and founded the Institute for Development Education and continued to work with perseverance and optimism till he passed away in 1982. Dr. Chandran Devanesen, the man, the educator, the historian, the humorist and the humanist, was like a shining light illuminating others' path. And those who cherish him are obligated to continue what he began, service to humanity. This endowment, I heard about this endowment, was instituted on the occasion of his birth centenary celebrations in 2017 through the extraordinary and tireless efforts of Dr. Mrs. Vasanthi Vijayakumar, former head of the Department of History and presently founder Vice Chancellor of the Captain Williamson Sangma State University, the first state university of Meghalaya. She has also brought out at that time a reprint of Dr. Chandran Devanesen's book, The Making of the Mahatma, to mark the occasion, which is widely appreciated. I take this opportunity to express our gratitude and wholeheartedly thank Dr. Vasanthi Vijayakumar and each and every one who have contributed to the institution of this endowment. With these words, I once again extend a very warm welcome to you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words. Words fall short to describe Dr. Chandran Devanesen, but we have still tried to summarize his life through a short video. So I would like all of you to pay attention as we play a short video based on the life of Dr. Devanesen. Thank you.
Dr. Chandran D.S. Devanesen. Dr. Chandran David Srinivasagam Devanesen was born on the 1st of November 1917 in Palayamkotte, Tamil Nadu. However, he was educated in Cambridge and Harvard universities. His doctoral thesis on Gandhi from Harvard was published in 1962 and titled The Making of the Mahatma. In 1946, he joined Madras Christian College as the head of the Department of History. By 1962, he was the perfect choice to become the first Indian principal of Madras Christian College that had been run by Scottish missionaries for 125 years. A beautiful blend of teacher, historian, poet, theologian, and educational administrator, he transformed the college with his dreams and vision. In 1970, he was awarded the Padma Shri for his outstanding contribution to education. In 1973, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi invited him to become the founder Vice-Chancellor of the Northeastern Hill University in Shillong, Meghalaya. He returned to Chennai in 1978 and along with his gracious wife Savitri, founded the rural development NGO Roofs for the Roofless. Let us hear from Dr. Devanesen himself in a rare video footage made in Canada.
I had to see my wife is from Sri Lanka and I'm from India. And we've been a husband and wife team in education for nearly 40 years. The size of the Indian educational enterprise is not sufficiently well known. We have the third largest educational system in the world after the United States and the Soviet Union. And trying to put quality into this vast educational machine is not an easy thing to attempt. At the higher level, that is at the university level, we have nearly 3 million students. We have over 100 universities. We have 4,000 colleges. So you can see what a vast undertaking it is and how difficult it is to make sure that the quality of it all is spread out and good. The main task, as I see it, is that this educational system must be turning out young people who contribute to the development of our country. And again, we are at a stage when we got to rethink the structures of higher education. And the Institute's been interested in community colleges as a possible model which is viable, which will help us at this time when we've got such a massive job to perform.
His dream for community colleges for India, for those unable to enter the formal collegiate system, was made a reality in 2002. Father Xavier Alphonse formed a bold partnership with Mrs. Savitri Devanesen, the director of Roofs for the Roofless, and established the Dr. Chandran Devanesen Rural Community College, Karanai village, in a thatched roof classroom that was previously used as a chicken coop. The Rural Community College runs diploma courses accredited by the Tamil Nadu Open University and the National Skills Development Corporation in nursing, desktop publishing, web and graphic design, refrigeration and air conditioning, beautician and healthcare, and fashion design and garment making. It is today known as a model college with gold and silver medalists among its students. The college runs on solar power. It has achieved 100% employment rate for students who started out as school dropouts. It is a unique co-educational rural college where the students learn yoga and have fun times dancing. It has even produced a few entrepreneurs. Roofs for the Roofless also runs the Ron Cook Balwadi for preschool children, founded by Mrs. Joan Cook, and an aged care day center. Roofs ran 250 self-help groups for women for skills training and empowerment. Roof's original purpose was to build brick houses that were not blown away by the monsoon. Our speaker this evening, Mrs. Chandrika Krishnamurthy Tandon, came to know Dr. Devanesen when she joined the commerce course at MCC 49 years ago. Chandrika actually describes Dr. Devanesen in her article in the 1972 College magazine as a person whose oratorical prowess needs no introduction. Interestingly, she said in the same article that the commerce students had conducted a swinging social, which she explained saying, "You see, people must get to know each other before good things can come about." This photograph shows her swinging and singing in the MCC pop group. Her classmate, Altaf Pasha, is in the front, and she is in the printed sari behind him. Here was the beginning of someone who totally represented Dr. Devanesen's concept for a successful character building and fun-filled university education. Just as Chandrika's motto today, love, light, laughter, embodies Dr. Devanesen's life and character. Love. Dr. Devanesen received extraordinary love from his mother, Thayammal, whose famous lawyer father, M.L. Pillai, funded Dr. Devanesen's father's study at Imperial College London in 1921. His mother's great love for the young Chandran is beautifully recorded in the diary she maintained in London. Of course, the great love of Dr. Devanesen's life was his wife, Savitri, who became his greatest partner and source of strength. Amazingly, he had time for his 3 sons, Sudarshan, Dayalan, and Mitran, who have all followed his example of service to the underprivileged. He loved the rural poor and implemented many rural development projects. In a fitting tribute The place which Dr. Devanesen obtained for college workers like the peons and gardeners to live is called Dr. Chandran Devanesen Nagar. Devanesen Nagar celebrated his birth centenary with great festivity and great gratitude. Light. A previous Vice-Chancellor of Madras University, referring to Dr. Devanesen's educational reforms, said, "His thoughts will continue to shine. He is a shining light." His tenure as principal of MCC was a time of phenomenal academic and infrastructural growth. As G.K. Matthew put it, there were certain things we did not dream about. A farm, a women's hostel on campus, a well-equipped fine arts center. But they happened, not because there were funds bulging in the bank, but only because there were dreams, faith, and hope living in Dr. Devanesen's heart. He developed 5 new academic courses, including the commerce course that has brought us together today. But Dr. Devanesen's success was not about buildings or plans. It was about people. He recognized the alumni as the greatest resource the college had. Their first function was to invite the best-known alumnus, the President of India, Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan. In a short time, there were 23 alumni associations across India. Not much is written about the extraordinary development of the Northeastern Hill University. The government of Meghalaya had allocated a 5-acre campus. After the first meeting with Dr. Devanesen, they ended up giving 1,200 acres for the central campus and 20 affiliated colleges across Meghalaya, Nagaland, and Mizoram. The hidden force at this time was the Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, who had said to Devanesen, "I entirely trust your vision and leadership." Dr. Devanesen was also able to attract high-quality staff to ensure that it was a university of class. Finally, we come to laughter. The famous Dr. Malcolm Adiseshaya said, "Dr. Devanesen is possessed with an irrepressible sense of humor that gushes forth and expresses his thoughts in a manner that enriches the mind, emboldens the heart, and lightens the spirit of all concerned." Dr. Devanesen's last article was to his grandchildren, titled, "A Clown Called Tata." He writes, "I have had to act like a clown to diffuse tension at stormy meetings. Tata's story may be the story of a clown for God who acted out his part in the circus ring of life under the big top of heaven. His cheeky humor is immortalized in the Madras Christian College Heber Hall song, sung to a baila tune that always left him dancing and all of us laughing."
Way down in Tambaram, there's a Heber Hall. Is there another like it? No, not at all. Way down in Tambaram, there's a Heber Hall. Is there another like it? No, not at all. If you come to Tambaram, darling, come to Heber Hall. Heber is a paradise, fish pond and all. Woolin day, masala day, anything you want. Best bills as high as hills, Heber is a home. If you come to Tambaram, darling, traveling in the train, get the Heber lads to meet you, they've got a place. If you want to marry me, darling, and to marry well, stick to a Heber lad and send the rest to hell. Way down in Tambaram, there's a Heber Hall. Is there another like it? No, not at all.
That was wonderful, wasn't it? I think I have mentioned a number of times how elated I am to welcome all of you to this day, as we are going to have an amazing discussion. I should mention the voices, the personalities who have graced us with their presence today. Professor Mridula Mukherjee and Professor Aditya Mukherjee from the Center of Historical Studies, JNU Delhi. They will be our intellectual direction for the day. No amount of words or expressions are enough to express the gratitude, ma'am and sir. It will be our absolute honor to felicitate you. I request Dr. Venkataramanujam to come forward and felicitate Dr. Mridula Mukherjee, and it should be followed by a memento presented by Professor Don Stanley, the former head of the Department of History. I now request Dr. Ashok from the Department of History to felicitate Professor Aditya Mukherjee, followed by a memento presented by Professor Barnabas Sir, the former faculty of our department and the warden of St. Thomas Hall. We have one more token of gratitude. The book is called Dr. Chandran Devanesen, A Life of Love and Service. This is written by Dr. Joshua Kalapati, the retired HOD of Philosophy, and edited by none other than Dr. Dayalan Devanesen. I request Sir to come forward and present the book written by him to Sir and Ma'am here. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much to Sir and Ma'am for being present with us today. As I've already said, that no amount of words are enough to describe her or introduce her, as she has given us an opportunity to celebrate our academic directions and rethink it today. It is important we introduce this amazing personality. I request Ms. S. Grace Miracle from First MA History to do the honor. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's a matter of honor and privilege to introduce our distinguished speaker for today's session, Professor Mridula Mukherjee. I now take great pleasure in introducing her to you. Mridula Mukherjee has taught history at the Center for Historical Studies, JNU, for over 4 decades. She is the General President-elect of the Indian History Congress 2026. She was the Director of Nehru Memorial Museum and Library from 2006 to 2011 and Dean, School of Social Sciences, JNU from 2012 to 2014. She has been a visiting professor and fellow at La Sapienza, University of Rome, Institutes of Advanced Study of Nantes, France, at University of Sao Paulo, Brazil, University of Lancaster, UK, University of Tokyo, Japan, and Duke University, USA. She was member of the External Advisory Board, Long Room Hub, Research Institute for Arts and Humanities, Trinity College, Dublin, Ireland. She co-authored India's Struggle for Independence and India Since Independence, both bestsellers published by Penguin with multiple reprints and translations and over 500,000 copies sold. She also authored Peasants in India's Non-Violent Revolution, Sage, and Colonializing Agriculture, The Myth of Punjab Exceptionalism, Sage. She writes regularly in newspapers and journals and has been a columnist. She was editor of the Sage series in Modern Indian History, in which 18 manuscripts were published, and is currently editor of the Penguin series in Modern Indian History. Thank you.
It is absolutely our honor to have someone like this amongst us today. Now, as we move forward to today's discussion, we shall waste no further time. This is to absorb, think, question, learn, and take back home with us. Professor Mridula Mukherjee shall take the floor as she delivers her lecture on the topic India of Gandhiji's Dreams. And if the historian or the politics enthusiast inside you has instantly caught onto the terms, then this is your opportunity to broaden your horizon. Ma'am, please come forward. You can be seated and continue the lecture. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, all the young students who have can you hear me? Who have so warmly welcomed me and Professor Aditya Mukherjee to your institution. I'm very grateful for my former student, Professor Venkataramanujam, for this invitation to come here and deliver this lecture. I'm also happy to be able to renew my acquaintance with all of you, as he had earlier also provided us occasion to come here, and we are in any case very, very impressed with your institution. Not only is it in physically beautiful surroundings, such a lovely forest. In fact, you live not in a city but in the midst of a forest. I think there are few institutions where you get this kind of ambience, but also it is an intellectually very alive place, a dynamic place, one of the best institutions in India, not only in this city or in this state. So I'm very happy to be here. Of course, I'm very happy to be invited to deliver the Devanesen lecture, apart from the fact that he was such a wonderful figure. And in fact, I wanted to share with you that in 1973, when Nehru was set up, the Northeastern Hill University, and he was the first Vice Chancellor, there were many of our contemporaries from Delhi, people we had studied with, who were friends, who went and took up jobs there with him as the Vice Chancellor. So we used to, that is how we first got to know of him, from our friends who were teaching there and who would come back and tell us about this wonderful Vice Chancellor whom they had, who was just like a friend and who was so dynamic and who was so friendly with the students and the faculty. So right from then of course, as historians, we had read his work on the making of the Mahatma, which I personally believe is a wonderful book. And you know that a film of the same title, largely inspired by that book, was also made by Shyam Benegal with the same title, The Making of the Mahatma, which is based on Gandhiji's years in South Africa. It's a brilliant film also. And I'm very happy, therefore, not largely a coincidence that given his interest in Mahatma Gandhi and his life and work, that I'm today going to be actually talking to you about on the subject of the Swaraj, or the India of Mahatma Gandhi's dreams. So there is more than a little, I should say, appropriateness about the title, coinciding with the interest of the person in whose memory we are meeting here today. This is way of paying homage to a great man, and you were very lucky that this institution, you had him, and he has contributed such a lot to the building of this institution, of which you are all beneficiaries. We hope that, you know, in this, in the circumstances in which we are living today, where for various reasons, social, political, financial, and otherwise, educational institutions are facing great stress. So I do wish with all my heart that this wonderful institution not only remains as good as it has been, but prospers and does not get affected by a lot of the vagaries and the waves of uncertainty which is affecting many fine institutions in the country today, including the institution with which I was associated for more than 40 years, which is the Jawaharlal Nehru University, which is one of India's finest institutions built over the last 50 years, but we are now witnessing a lot of stress and difficulties so there is no guarantee that the history of an institution will necessarily protect it from the vagaries of the present and the future. We all have to try very hard. We have to preserve what we have. We have to fight to preserve what we have. And we have to give our best to see that for the future generation, we are all beneficiaries. What Professor Devanesen did and others of his generation did, as he says in this video, it was a great achievement for this country. At that time when he's talking 100 universities, so many thousand colleges, all these great achievements which were part of our nation building efforts in the first 30, 40 years of our nation's independent life, I think it is so important that we are able to take those forward, maintain them, preserve them, and take them forward and find ways through collective effort. And one of the ways in which we can do that is to be conscious of what we have and to be conscious of how we were so lucky to have the opportunity of studying and benefiting from that. But we must see to it that our future generations also have the same benefit. And it should not be that a young person growing up today, as I very often find, thinks that the only way to get a good education is to leave this country. That's a very sad situation. I have nothing against people going abroad and studying. Chandran Devanesen did the same. But not with this idea that the only way that you can get a good education is, and certainly 75 years or more after independence, that should not be the situation, that we cannot provide to our students the very best education in the world. That has to remain our objective. That has to remain our commitment, that we will offer that. For various reasons, some people may go, benefit, hopefully come back and again contribute to this country. But that aim has to be there, that we are able to provide the best education to our students, to our youth, not today, but in the future as well. Because as you know, institutions are not built in a day. It takes years and years of effort to build a good institution. But often it takes very little time for institutions to decline. And we as historians particularly, I think, are very sensitive to this aspect of time, how much time it takes to build something. A nation, an university, a college, even a family, it takes a tradition, it takes years to build. And that's why it is so important that we preserve what we have, and on that basis we go forward. With these words, let me begin my talk today with you, which is what is the India of Mahatma Gandhi's dreams? I am asking this question, which is relevant in itself. It remains always relevant, but it becomes particularly relevant because somehow we also find around us these days a lot of debate and discussion about, our historical figures, whether it is Jawaharlal Nehru or Subhash Bose or Sardar Patel or Mahatma Gandhi. A lot of public debate, including in the famous WhatsApp University, happens on history. In fact, it has become very difficult to be a historian today with credibility, because everybody around you, sort of parades and projects themselves as experts in history. Anybody can get up, make a little reel, make a video, put it on WhatsApp. We have lots of people who are very fond, people at the highest levels of our ruling establishment also are very easy with making pronouncements on history, often on subjects on which perhaps discretion is the better part of valor, you know. So it's a very difficult job. Sometimes as a historian, I actually talk to my friends and colleagues and students and say that, you know, I mean, is it any point doing history anymore? Because everybody around you seems to know more history than you. You know, so is it become a job only to go on correcting what we think are distortions in history, or do we have the opportunity to do fresh research, bring fresh ideas, you know, all those? And one of those things is, you know, the concept of, for Gandhiji particularly, I find that there is a lot of loose kind of talk using the concept which he often used of Ram Raj. You know, we all know that during that freedom struggle, Gandhiji, among many other things, he deployed the concept of Ram Rajya as an ideal form of government. He often talked about it, that the India that I want, what are we fighting for? We are fighting to establish a Ram Rajya. And that Ram Rajya, as he explained again and again, was his way of describing an ideal form of government. A system in which there would be justice for everybody. He said again and again, when he was questioned, when there was some criticism, he explained in many, many ways that, and I'll read out one or two quotations to you also to make the point clear. He said, my idea of Ram Raj does not mean Hindu Raj. And therefore, he, along with the concept of Ram Raj, repeatedly said, Ram Raj, Khudai Raj, kingdom of God on earth. The Christian concept, kingdom of God on earth. For Islam, he said Khudai Raj. He even said Sultanate, Khudai Sultanate. So he used these words as synonyms to say, my idea of using Ram Raj is only to explain to the people that the India which we want, what we are fighting for, is an India in which there will be justice for all, high and low. And there are many quotations. I don't want to spend a lot of time reading out those two because they'll take time, where he goes on saying one by one, he says that in my ideal of Ram Raj, women will have equal status, in which very often he says, there is no Ram Raj without the participation of women. Only if women participate equally in the battle for freedom can we establish a Ram Raj. He continually says, without democracy, there is no Ram Raj. Without caste discrimination ending, there is no Ram Raj. So the point is that he used this concept in order to, in a way, use an idiom which was there in the Indian tradition, which people understood. And I want to say this to you. It is a complete distortion to say that people thought Ram Raj meant Hindu Raj. They did not. People did not think so. If you talk to, sorry? Okay. So people did not believe, that was not the notion in people's minds that Ram Raj meant a Hindu Raj. Okay. And again, if there was any such scope for misinterpretation, repeatedly he explained that I do not mean that. I mean, same as Khudai Raj, same as kingdom of God on earth. Why did he, so the question arises that why did he use this concept? The thing is, this is one thing that I want you to understand. For a political leader that he was, and somebody who believed that there is no politics without mass participation, He wanted the poorest Indian to participate in the struggle for freedom. He repeatedly said that there is no value in winning the battle for freedom if it is not based on the active participation of the masses of India. One reason why he chose, and I will come to this, non-violence as the method through which we will get freedom is because he believed non-violence ensured the participation of the poorest of the Indians. If there was a violent movement, there would be no space for the participation of the ordinary person. So, once you have that as an objective, how do you carry your ideas to the people? How do you reach the last man or the last woman? You have to explain the modern ideas of democracy, parliamentary democracy, rule of law, everybody equal before the law, no discrimination based on caste or sex or religion. You have to explain to people in a language and an idiom that they understand. Now, people are familiar with certain concepts, certain idioms from their tradition. In the Indian tradition, the concept of Ram Rajya is one such concept which is there, which people are familiar with because of their familiarity with mythology, where Ram is an ideal ruler. Ram is not seen as a Hindu ruler. He's not a Hindu ruler ruling over others. He's an ideal ruler. If you remember the famous term often used for describing Ram, it is Maryada Purushottam. An honorable man, all right. In fact, Gandhiji gives the example that there was, why I use the concept of Ram Rajya is because, and he gives the example that in Ram's kingdom, even a dhobi, a washerman, could question the king. You know the incident in which the washerman questions Ram about Sita's purity. As a result, Sita is banished from the kingdom. Now, issue is not, Gandhiji is not justifying what Ram did. He is saying that the capacity of the lowest in the land, a washerman, to get up and ask a question of the king, that is Ram Raj. Now, what is he explaining through this? He's saying right to dissent, right to criticize your ruler, what we today say, speaking truth to power, modern concept. He's showing that to the people. He's teaching them that through deploying a traditional idiom. But what he was teaching them was a modern concept. But to explain a modern concept to ordinary people, most of whom are illiterate, versed in their traditional imagery, how do you reach to them? So we have to understand in a complex way why these kind of concepts were deployed by somebody like Mahatma Gandhi, and we have to be careful that we don't misunderstand them. Why am I today emphasizing it? Because I am finding in the recent writings of some of the people who otherwise I think have no great understanding of Mahatma Gandhi, including when the Ram temple, the modern Ram temple was consecrated at Ayodhya, there was an attempt to link that with Gandhiji and his concept of Ram Rajya, saying that by building this temple, we have fulfilled the wishes of Ram because this is Ram Rajya, building a modern temple. Now, I want to say very clearly, number one, I hope you know, Gandhiji never went to a temple. Gandhiji was a Hindu. He said it again and again, I'm a devout Hindu. But he never went to a temple. He said, God is my personal thing, it's inside me. The prayer meetings which were held by him every evening, no matter where he was in India, whether in his ashram or whether he was in a rural area in Bengal, or whether he was in Birla House, or whether he was in the Bhangi colony in Delhi, evening prayer meeting would be held, and that was the way in which he met people. Anybody could walk into the prayer meeting. There was never any security, there was never any checking, there was never any this thing. There could be 2 lakh people in the prayer meeting, and there could be 50 people in a prayer meeting. But every day where he was free, he held a prayer meeting. At that prayer meeting, prayers of all religions used to be recited. Right? For Parsi, Sikh, Buddhist, Jain, Islam, prayers of all religions would be recited every day in his prayer meeting. So through his example, he showed that for him all religions are equal. He remains a Hindu, but he is not for establishing any superior position of Hindus, and certainly Ram Rajya does not mean any resemblance to what could be called Hindu Raj. So with this introduction, let me just read to you 1 or 2 quotations and then get into the lecture. In 1931, 26th of March 1931, this would be the period after Gandhi-Irwin Pact and just before the starting of the Karachi Congress. I'm quoting, "The Swaraj of our dreams recognizes no race or religious distinctions, nor is it to be the monopoly of the lettered persons, nor yet of moneyed men. Neither educated nor rich will have any monopoly on Swaraj. Swaraj is to be for all, including the farmer, but emphatically, listen to this, including the maimed, the blind, so those who are physically, disadvantaged, the starving, toiling millions." So this is his conception, that the India of the future that we have to build has to be for everybody. And he makes it clear in not just a general kind of way, but emphasizing it is not only for the educated, it is not only for the rich, it is not only for the physically able, right? And not only for those who have enough. Another quotation I'm reading out to you from just a few days later. I quote, "It has been said that Indian Swaraj will be the rule of the majority community, that is the Hindus." We couldn't get clearer than that, right? He's saying, it has been said that Indian Swaraj will be the rule of the majority community, that is the Hindus. There could not be a greater mistake than that. If it were to be true, I for one would refuse to call it Swaraj and would fight it with all the strength at my command. For to me, Hind Swaraj, which is what he called his ideal, he wrote a book also called Hind Swaraj. Hind Swaraj is the rule of all people. It's the rule of justice. So democracy, rule of all people, justice, these are all the concepts which he's constantly emphasizing to convey to the people what is the India that we are fighting for. And as you can see, he uses the term Hind Swaraj. Does he ever use the word that today we are finding around us, which is Hindu Rashtra? Never will you find such a concept being used by Gandhiji. He explains it that if it is the rule of the majority community, he says there could be no greater mistake than that. And I, for one, would refuse to call it Swaraj. And I would fight it with all the strength at my command. Please understand the vehemence of the words which he is using. He would reject it and he would fight it. Anything that resembles the rule of the majority community. So I think one of the first things we have to understand, if we are asking ourselves the question, where we are today, are we living out, are we trying to achieve the India of Mahatma Gandhi's dreams, then we must ask ourselves this question, that all these things which he has said in such plain language, are we keeping those in front of us, or are we forgetting those? So I'll try today to explore some facets of Mahatma Gandhi's vision for India, especially his ideas and practice on religion and secularism, democracy and dissent, violence and non-violence. I don't know how many of these I'll be able to do because time obviously will be short. But certain other very important aspects I will not be able to even touch upon, such as independence and sovereignty, economic vision of equity and empathy for the poor, his struggle against caste oppression, his views on the position and role of women, and many other aspects which are very important, but I will not have the opportunity to explain those or talk about them today. I'm mentioning them here because they are very, very important. When we discuss the India of Mahatma Gandhi's dreams, these are also very important areas. Now, for those of you who may not be totally familiar, with what were the essential contributions of Gandhiji, I will take a little bit of time to just do a quick survey. And just to again, even if to remind you what we are talking about. Who was this man? Was he somebody who looked like an ascetic, had no teeth, talked, he was not an orator, when he talked, he was not impressive at all? And was he somebody who was an ascetic, who sat somewhere in the Himalayas or in some remote place and had nothing to do with life? Or what was he? What was his whole life about? So just to have a little picture in your head of who is this man that we are talking about, I will just take you through a very brief summary of his life. His political life began with the struggle of Indian immigrants, mostly poor indentured laborers in South Africa in 1893. So do remember that. He works with indentured labor, many of them from Tamil Nadu, which is why he had a special connection with Tamil Nadu. He tried a variety of methods of protest, which eventually culminated in the adoption of mass civil disobedience, or satyagraha, as he called it, at a mass meeting held at the Empire Theatre in Johannesburg on 11th of September, on 9/11, 1906. All this is beautifully talked about in Professor Devanesen's book. I wish you would read it. Many struggles and travails, including long jail terms, marked the rest of his years in South Africa. He was a rigorous imprisonment he faced in South Africa in very, very bad conditions. Okay? So please don't imagine, as sometimes we are told today, oh, the leaders of the freedom struggle, they did go to jail, but they used to live in very fancy jails and they had all facilities. I've heard these things being said. They didn't really sacrifice. I don't know from where people pick up this kind of nonsense, but it's there. On social media, it's all there. You just scratch it and you will see it, Gandhiji himself suffered rigorous imprisonment in the worst of jail conditions, and you know how Indians were treated in South Africa. Okay. Then he returned to India in 1915. And till his martyrdom in 1948, he had initiated and guided, along with colleagues and followers, an amazing variety of satyagraha campaigns. Why am I telling you this story? Because the picture I want you to carry in your head of Mahatma Gandhi is that of a fighter, not somebody who's sitting quietly in an ashram and spinning his charkha, but a man who's at the front. The picture is of him with his staff leading the Dandi March. He walked how many 100 miles to the sea on foot to go and break the salt law. That is the picture, with a lathi in his hand and people walking behind him, that you should keep in your head. The repertoire of Satyagraha included, first and foremost, the nationwide struggles against colonial rule, beginning with the Rowlatt Satyagraha of 1919. That was his first All India campaign. Then the non-cooperation movement, 1920 to 22. Civil disobedience movements, 1930 to 31 and 32 to 34. Culminating during the Second World War in the Quit India movement. And before that, the individual civil disobedience movement. This is 1941 to 1945. And these movements which I have just mentioned, these were nationwide campaigns which involved the Indian people in their millions. These were not small movements. They involved people in their millions, both in non-cooperation and in civil disobedience movement, for example, 20 to 22 and 30 to 32, 33. More than 1 lakh people each time went to jail. Each time. More than 1 lakh people went to jail. Lakhs and millions participated in public meetings. I will read to you to illustrate this point which I've just made. A speech which Gandhiji himself made to a crowd of people who came to the Sabarmati ashram one day before he was to begin the Dandi March. So we are on the 10th of March 1930. Next day he is going to embark on the Dandi March. So people were, as people heard struggle is about to begin, you know, a lot of people every day would collect at the Sabarmati ashram. So he is speaking to them. And he's explaining to them how non-violence enabled the widest participation of the masses and how it put the government in an unenviable quandary. I'm quoting now directly. Collected Works, volume 43, page 37. Though the battle is to begin in a couple of days, how is it that you can come here so fearlessly? I do not think any one of you would be here if you had to face rifle shots or bombs. But you have no fear of rifle shots or bombs. Why? Supposing I had announced that I was going to launch a violent campaign, not necessarily with men armed with rifles, but even with sticks or stones, do you think the government would have left me free until now? Can you show me an example in history, be it in England, America, or Russia, where the state has tolerated violent defiance of authority for a single day? But here you know that the government is puzzled and perplexed. Now this phrase which he's using, puzzled and perplexed, interesting, I found later on, looking at something else, it's a phrase that actually Lord Reading, the end of the non-cooperation movement, had used, where he said we are puzzled and perplexed. And Nehru repeats it in his writing. So I came across, I did not know the origin of that. I thought he is saying where the government will be puzzled and perplexed, but actually he's only quoting from what Reading said. So actually the government said that they were puzzled and perplexed. Puzzled and perplexed here means what? It means they don't know what to do. So he said, now you know that because we are insisting on non-violence, the government doesn't know what to do with us. We are going to fight, but we are going to fight in a non-violent way. So they are puzzled and perplexed. What are we going to do with these people? Further explaining the power of non-violent mass civil disobedience, he said, I'm quoting, supposing 10 persons in each of the 700,000 villages in India, 10 out of each village, came forward to manufacture salt and disobey the Salt Act. What do you think this government can do? Even the worst autocrat you can imagine would not dare to blow regiments of peaceful civil resistors out of a cannon's mouth. If only you will bestir yourself just a little, I assure you we should be able to tire this government out in a very short time. In these two small paragraphs which I've just read out to you, in many ways is the essence of the Gandhian method, his strategy. What is he trying to do? He explains that if large number of people participate in a very simple act just to defy the salt law, but it is defiance of a law. If you defy a law, the government has to take action. Because if it doesn't take action, it means it has no power. So the people will then say, well, if today we can break the salt law, tomorrow we stop paying taxes, next day we stop doing this because this government has no power. So government, even when you break a small law, it may not be something very big, has to take action, right? But you are putting it in a quandary because actually your action is not so repulsive. It is not very great. The people of India say, so what if people manufacture salt? What is so bad about manufacturing salt? Surely we have a right to our own salt. This is our salt. Why are you taxing our salt? So you're constantly creating a situation in which the administration is put to embarrassment, not able to take action, or if it takes action, it becomes more unpopular. And that is what basically the strategy was, that what you call a winning strategy is one in which your opponent has no answer. Whatever that opponent does, he loses. All right. And I'll give you a quotation which exactly demonstrates this from a civil servant, a British civil servant by the name of C.F.V. Williams. You may even be familiar with him because he was based in Madras. And he expressed this dilemma in early 1930. And I'm quoting him. He says, if we do too much, Congress will cry repression. Repression, here we are being repressed, we are being unfair, all right. If we do too little, Congress will cry victory. So either way, the government is put morally in a position where the ordinary person who's looking at the situation says government is wrong, right? Because if they do repress, the people are going to say, why are you repressing? No? But if they don't, then they will say, but so we have won. So this is what the whole method of satyagraha, of civil disobedience and all these were meant to achieve, was to gradually erode the moral authority, the ideological hegemony of the government, and increase the moral authority, increase the ideological influence of the Indian national movement. Of course, one other thing, Gandhiji himself, and I think this is very important especially for young people to know this, he himself pointed out how non-violent struggle was the choice of the brave. Because often it is said, you know, I've heard this being said, oh, Bhagat Singh and all, they gave their life. They were willing to take to violence. They are the real heroes. As if those who fought in the non-violent battle were not heroes. What did Gandhiji say? Non-violence was the choice of the brave, not of the weak. In Hind Swaraj, he wrote, and I'm reading out a quotation to you. He said, what do you think? Wherein is courage required? In blowing others to pieces from behind a cannon? Is that courage? You have a big weapon and you blow people to pieces. Or with a smiling face to approach a cannon and be blown to pieces. Who is the true warrior? He who keeps death always as a bosom friend, or he who controls the death of others? Believe me that a man devoid of courage can never be a passive resistor. So this notion that non-violent struggle was not courageous, it was because the word passive resistance is often used to describe it, that was not courageous, that it was brave. If I don't know if you people have seen the movie Gandhi by Attenborough, and if you will try and remember the scenes of the Dharasana salt raids, where this is during the salt satyagraha, where bands and bands of people are going to go and break the salt factories over there, trying to enter, and the merciless way in which they are beaten by the police, and so many of them are badly injured. And I mean, there are many examples of very courageous actions by non-violent revolutionaries. So it was this courage of what we should call militant non-violence. Non-violence is not non-militant. It's militant non-violence because it is fighting, of satyagraha, that made heroes out of ordinary men and women, enabling them to defy a mighty empire on which the sun never set. Gandhiji's emphasis on non-violence was also linked to his deep conviction that you could not separate the means from the end. Very often we hear this, no? That Gandhiji said, you cannot separate means for the end. If you use the wrong means, you will also achieve the wrong end. And very often people say that's nonsense. If the end is good, you can use any means to achieve a good end. Now look at the way in which this is explained. In fact, he believed that means were bound to shape the end. And why did he believe that? He said you could not hope to build a humane, caring, inclusive, and free society on the shaky foundations of violence. The gun that is aimed at the enemy today can easily be turned to cow down a comrade with whom you now disagree. What has happened in most revolutions in the world? They have ended up in civil wars. Russian Revolution, Chinese Revolution, right? You are armed, no? What lot does it take? Once you come to power and you are the victor, then there are others who are your rivals. You turn the gun on them. If walls were not to come up between peoples, the methods chosen for resolving differences and conflict must be such that they ensure justice without breaking down communication. The Lakshman Rekha of non-violence made this possible. If you do not create everlasting enmity, why could we become friends with the British once the empire was over? As Aditya said yesterday in Madras University, he was giving the William Meyer memorial endowment lecture. He said, we are today able to have an endowment lecture in the name of a British civil servant who was a finance member in the government of India in the 1920s, obviously must have done many things which were very harmful for the Indian economy, Indian people. But today we do not remember that. Okay? No, let me say something. Today we do not keep that hatred in our hearts, because we never had hatred. Because Gandhiji told us, he taught us, we are fighting a system. We are not fighting an individual. We are not fighting a race. We are not fighting a religion. We are against the British because there's a colonial system of oppression which they are imposing on us. We are not against an individual civil servant. Therefore, we will not use violence. We want to convert everybody. Convert means make it impossible for them to rule, to continue with that exploitative system. Once the exploitative system goes, we are friends. We have nothing against you. And he continually said, we are not fighting them. And not only he, right from the beginning of our freedom struggle, our freedom fighters said, we are only against the British because they are oppressing us economically. They are exploiting us. We are not against them because they are Christian. We are not against them because they belong to a different color. They are white race. We have nothing against them except that they are exploiting us and leading to the poverty of our people. The whole base of Indian nationalism was in economic nationalism. So the answer did not lie in more violence, in better weapons of mass destruction. Gandhiji gave an answer to the use of the atom bomb. When the US used the atom bomb in 1945 against Japan, Gandhiji's comment was, the moral to be legitimately drawn from the supreme tragedy of the bomb is that it will not be destroyed by counter bombs, even as violence cannot be by counter violence. Mankind has to get out of violence only through non-violence. Hatred can be overcome only by love. Counter-hatred only increases the surface as well as the depth of the hatred. So this was how he understood the relevance also of non-violence at a broader level. It was not only for the struggle for freedom. And as we have found, in subsequent decades, when Gandhiji is no longer with us, his path was chosen by other great movements in India and other parts of the world. In his own land, grassroots movements of various kinds have found themselves drawn to the method of satyagraha. The environment movement, whether it is the Chipko movement in the Himalayas or the Narmada Bachao movement in central India, has also identified itself closely with the Gandhian methods and ideals. Many sections of the women's movement, as well as recent struggles for deepening of democracy, such as the movements for right to employment, right to information, right to education, right to food, all bear a similar imprint. In the United States of America, Martin Luther King Jr. consciously adopted Gandhian principles in the struggle of the black people for civil rights. In Europe, the peace movement and the green movement were built on similar lines. In South Africa, the movement against apartheid was inspired by Gandhiji's example. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission set up in South Africa after the end of apartheid evolved as a truly Gandhian institution which promoted reconciliation rather than revenge, but on the basis of truth. Lech Walesa or Wałęsa, the legendary leader of solidarity in Poland, showed to the world how Gandhian technique of non-violent mass action could be effectively employed in the struggle for democracy and civil liberties. Poland's example has illuminated the path for many other movements that have struggled for democracy in the twilight years of the 20th century. In the Philippines, in South Korea, in East Europe, and in the former Soviet Union. These great movements for social transformation developed further what was called the science of satyagraha. The dominant motives were mass public rallies in city squares, often involving millions, which turned into days-long sit-ins, candlelight vigils, offering of flowers to soldiers, and festooning battle tanks with banners and streamers. It is evident then that diverse movements for human dignity and freedom in many lands continue to find meaning in satyagraha and are able to adapt it accordingly in the prophetic words of Jawaharlal Nehru. He said, "We live today in a world torn with hatred and violence and fear and passion, and the shadow of war hangs heavily over us. Gandhi told us to cast away our fear and passion and to keep away from hatred and violence. His voice may not be heard by many in the tumult and shouting of today, but it will have to be heard and understood sometime or other if this world is to survive in any civilized form." Gandhiji's critique of Western civilization has often tended to obfuscate the fact that the movement he led was aimed at establishing modern parliamentary democracy with rule of law, adult suffrage, guaranteeing freedom, fundamental rights of freedom of expression, association, as embodied in the Karachi resolution of the Congress. I have already mentioned that Gandhiji never said he wanted to go back to that Gandhiji wanted to go back to some mythical Ram Rajya in which kings ruled over obedient subjects. His Ram Rajya was a metaphorical expression of a just society free of exploitation. It was not a political model of a Hindu monarchy. I want to make it very, very clear. And I had already said this to you, but let me read out just one quotation. I quote, Gandhiji in 1947, all right? I'm giving you the date because this is when partition is happening. So it's not that he's changed his mind now that India is going to be divided. He thinks that Pakistan is going to be based on the basis of Islam. Therefore, India should also become now a Hindu Rashtra. In 1947, he's saying very clearly, let no one commit the mistake of thinking that Ram Rajya means the rule of the Hindus. My Ram is another name for Khuda or God. It was Khudai Raj, which is the same thing as the kingdom of God on earth. So he was never confused about what he meant. So democracy and civil liberties were a major concern for Gandhiji. And I will just give you, to illustrate, I will give you one or two quotations to show how he expressed his commitment to civil liberties and democracy. In 1922, in January, at the height of the non-cooperation movement, he writes, I quote, "We must first make good the right of free speech and free association before we make any other progress towards our goal. We must defend these elementary rights with our lives." That's how important, he says, the struggle for civil liberties is. You must be willing to even sacrifice your life for it. So important today when we are facing today assaults on civil liberties. It's very important for us to remember what Gandhiji thought about it and ask ourselves, are we doing something at least to keep up his vision? In another article which he wrote soon after, he says, I quote, "Liberty of speech means it is unassailed even when the speech hurts. That is, if you're criticizing me and I still allow freedom of speech, then that is true liberty of speech. That is," I read it again, Liberty of speech means it is unassailed, that is, it is not affected, even when the speech hurts. Liberty of the press can be said to be truly respected only when the press can comment on the severest terms upon and even misrepresent matters. Press should be allowed to even misrepresent. Why? Because who is to decide it's misrepresenting? In the name of saying you are misrepresenting, you can suppress anything in the press. Who's to decide? If the government in power or those who are powerful are to decide what is misrepresentation, then where is the freedom of the spread? So he very clearly says press must be allowed to even misrepresent. Freedom of association is truly respected when assemblies of people can discuss even, and listen to this, revolutionary projects. So if you say you have freedom of association, you can meet, you can have a meeting, but if you can't talk about certain things, if you can't use certain terminology, if you can't use certain words, what is that freedom? And he goes to the extent of saying they should be able to discuss even revolution. Revolutionary project means overturning the government of the day. Right? So that for him is freedom of speech, freedom of civil liberty. Okay. And lastly, he says, civil liberty consistent with the observance of non-violence is the first step towards Swaraj. It is the breath of political and social life. It is the foundation of freedom. There is no room here for dilution or compromise. It is the water of life. So, what is he saying is the water of life? Civil liberties is the water of life. What is water to life? There is no life without water, right? So what is he saying? So civil liberty is as important as water is to life. And then he says, but it also cannot be diluted. I'm quoting him. But it also cannot be diluted. The imagery is very important because water is something that you can't dilute. So if you have civil liberty, but you say it is only in here, you're only allowed this, you're only allowed that, then that is no civil liberty. It has to be absolute. It cannot be compromised. And how did Gandhiji put these ideas into practice? I will give you only one example, though I have many over here. How did he show to the people what he meant by all these ideas? I think I constantly like to emphasize that to understand Gandhiji, we have to not just read what he wrote or what he said, which is there in his collected works. We have to also constantly analyze what he did. We have to study his movements. We have to study in concrete the movements which he led. What was the action that he advocated and what was the action which he implemented? So I would say that here I want to give you an example how he put it into practice. Because most of our national leaders, I find, taught through their own example. By doing, as Gandhiji said, be the change you want to be. You want. Be it. Do it in your own life. And that was one of his greatness, and why people followed him was he never asked anybody to do something which he didn't first do himself. He never asked people to sacrifice and not sacrifice it. He made maximum sacrifices himself, as you know, even reducing his dress to the very minimum, living in such simple circumstances, living in an ashram, not even a family life, living in a hut with open doors and windows that anybody could come and go all the time. And mind you, he was a very prosperous lawyer in South Africa, a very wealthy lawyer, living the life of a very rich man, you know. And he was trained, as you know, he was a barrister from London. So it's not that he didn't have the opportunity to live a luxurious life, but he had given up all of that. So Gandhiji, what he says, so this is one example that said you want to give. You people might have heard of the Meerut conspiracy case. This is 1929. The British government was very worried that the communists were becoming very powerful. So they picked up those whom they thought were the extreme wing of the left, hoping to thereby divide the left and the national movement. So they arrested 32 people, among whom were trade union leaders, political leaders, including 3 British communists who had come to India to help in the trade union movement. Dange was one of those who was, S.A. Dange, founder of the Communist Party, he was one of them, and many others. Many top political communist leaders of that time were all put in the jail. They were put up for trial in a small town in Uttar Pradesh, UP, called Meerut. And very soon the Meerut conspiracy case became a national cause. The British thought they would isolate the left-wing activists, convict them, send them to long terms to jail, and thereby finish off the movement. Instead, what happened was, Jawaharlal, Nehru, M.A. Ansari, M.C. Chagla, all big lawyers, took up their defense, they became their lawyers. Gandhiji himself visited the Meerut prisoners in jail. You know, he was in Delhi and he was meeting the Viceroy just before the civil disobedience movement was to start in 1929. He had gone to meet the Viceroy. From there, by car, he drove to Meerut unannounced. He landed up over there saying, I want to meet the Meerut prisoners. You know? And now, to show solidarity with them, what is the example that I'm telling you? Certainly, he did not agree with the communists. Their ideology, their methods were completely different from his. They used to criticize him in no uncertain terms. Yet, he goes there to show we may have differences, but we respect you. You know, we respect your right to say and do what you want to do, what method you want to follow. So through practice, what the people of India who are watching this, who are reading about this, what is the message they get? Respect difference. Your political rival or person who differs with you is not your opponent, he's not your enemy. You can work together. There are many, many examples of this that I can give. By the way, in the same way, Jawaharlal Nehru visited Bhagat Singh and his comrades in jail, when they were in jail, to show solidarity with them. And the Congress people, as I said, put up defense teams, legal defense teams to fight for the freedom of the communists and the revolutionaries. All the time they did this. This happened later when Subhash Bose's army, you know, the INA people came back to India, and you know how the British picked up 3 people and put them up for trial, you know, saying that they have betrayed, you know, their war against the king and all that. And the entire Indian National Congress, including Jawaharlal Nehru, wore his lawyer's robes for the first time since he had joined the non-cooperation movement, which 1920. He had never functioned as a lawyer all these years, but he donned his robes, and the best of the lawyers of the country fought for the justice and mercy to those soldiers. They didn't say Subhash Bose left us, he followed a different method, we disagree with him. Now, it's a common cause. We may have our differences, but we fight together. Okay. I'm winding up. One last. The last point which I want to make, and I'll make it very briefly because we do not now have the time to go into it, that Gandhiji is a wonderful example of being deeply religious but totally secular. I want to emphasize this because there is no contradiction between believing in religion and being a secular person. What were his views on religion, its role in public life, its relationship with morality? He saw himself as a reformer of the Hindu religion, rejecting those elements which did not pass the test of rationality. He specifically rejected scriptures which espoused untouchability and the inferior status of women. He said it in so many words. If the scripture says they believe in untouchability, I reject it. If it says women is inferior to man, I reject it. He said, I subject the Quran and the Indian scriptures to the same test of rationality. If they don't pass the test of rationality, in my eyes, they are rejected. He was not known to visit temples, I already said it. He did not observe any religious rituals. His daily prayer meetings were open to all, have recitation from many different traditions. He often said, how did he look upon religion? Religion was a tree which had many branches, which represented different religious faiths, and all faiths had the same message. When he found that his statement about not wanting a politics without religion was being misunderstood, he clarified again and again that by religion in this case, he meant morality and not any denominational religion. Because this is also often quoted out of context. Gandhiji said there is no politics without religion, meaning he wanted to bring Hinduism into religion. No. He said, here I mean ethics, morality, dharma, in the true sense of the term dharma, which is about ethics and the way in which we live our lives, you know. So that is what he meant when he said should be no politics without religion. It means without ethics. Obviously, he did not mean you bring your religion into politics. He made lifelong efforts at Hindu-Muslim unity against the communal divide and communal violence. Examples are the Khilafat movement, Gandhi Jinnah talks, his refusal to accept the idea of partition, mass campaign against communalism and communal violence from November 1946 to January 1948 till he died. His commitment to secularism and opposition to communalism was as absolute as his faith in non-violence and democracy and civil liberties. As early as 1931, he had said, it has been said, no, I have already read out this quotation to you, so I'm not reading out. Yeah, that was in my, it was there in the beginning, it was there in the conclusion. The call for Quit India in 1942 was accompanied by his unequivocal declaration. This is a passage from the speech which he gives, giving the call, the last big battle against the British that we fought, the Quit India movement. Some people call it the August Revolution. There he said, and I quote, and I'll end with this, free India will be no Hindu Raj. It will be Indian Raj based not on the majority of any religious sect or community, but on the representatives of the whole people without distinction of religion. Those Hindus who, like Dr. Munje and Sri Savarkar, believe in the doctrine of the sword, may seek to keep the Muslims under Hindu domination. I do not represent that section. I represent the Congress. Do you want to kill the Congress, which is the goose that lays golden eggs? If you distrust the Congress, you may rest assured there is to be perpetual war between Hindus and Muslims, and the country will be doomed to continue warfare and bloodshed. But, he said, congressmen will sacrifice their lives in order to protect the Musliman against a Hindu's attack, and vice versa. It is a part of their creed. It is one of the essentials of non-violence. As late as 1947 November, after independence, he said, when the cry for a Hindu Rashtra was very loud, he said, the state was bound to be wholly secular. The state of our conception must be a secular democratic state. He further said, if a minority in India, a minority on the score of its religious profession, was made to feel small on that account, he could only say that this India was not the India of his dreams. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm sure that this was a very memorable lecture and we have a lot to take back. I have a lot to take back if I am sharing my personal experience. And it was wonderful having you. So we look forward, thank you, ma'am. We look forward to Professor Aditya Mukherjee's lecture, which will be happening in 15 minutes. We'll take a break of 15 minutes you can disperse and come back in 15 minutes. With that, I, Shrija Datta, sign off as your host. My friend will be taking over in the next lecture. Thank you so much.
Good morning, respected dignitaries, esteemed faculty members, and my dear students. It's my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome you all to the Dr. Chiranjeevi J. Nirmal Endowment Lecture organized by the Department of History, Madras Christian College. Thank you for being part of today's program. To speak about the significance of this endowment and to reflect on the contribution of Dr. Chiranjeevi J. Nirmal, I now invite Dr. R. Venkata Ramanujam, Head of the Department of History, to address the gathering.
Thank you. A very good morning to all of you once again, and welcome back after the short break that we had. I think we had a wonderful lecture from Professor Mukherjee on Gandhian ideals in the first session. Thank you, ma'am, for that wonderful lecture, very illuminating and enlightening for all of us who are here. Now we eagerly look forward to the Dr. Chiranjeevi J. Nirmal Endowment Lecture from Professor Aditya Mukherjee, who is going to speak on the historical roots of India's development strategy. Before we move on to this lecture, in the beginning itself I wanted to say this quote. Actually, I was thinking about it, but I missed it out. But I just to highlight two small, or at least an incident about connecting Chandran Devanesen, Professor Chandran Devanesen, and that incident we had. When I first went to, along with Gangadhar and my classmate, we went to JNU and met ma'am. Ma'am was waiting for the next lecture. We were standing outside the classroom in the first floor. And ma'am, just where are you from? We introduced ourselves. Two things ma'am said. One to Gangadhar, and she said, we're very happy to have you. But then she said, we will provide you all kinds of assistance that is required. My friend is visually challenged. But she said, don't ever think that we will go light on you in terms of academic standards, but every other help we will be able to. You will be on par with everybody else. So that is a very, very interesting thing. So nobody can rely on any excuse in terms of meeting the academic standards that are required. The second, the moment we said MCC, said immediately, okay, do you know about Dr. Chandran Devanesen? Naive that we were. Yes, we know about him. He's the first Indian principal. He was the vice chancellor of Nehru. He founded it. All that we said. But then he said very interesting. Ma'am said, have you read his book, The Making of the Mahatma? That is how, for the first time, I got introduced to that book, The Making of the Mahatma. But it still took some years for me to read it. But when the centenary year, which was celebrated in 2017, and the reprint of the book was brought, I had the opportunity to review it and introduce that book to the audience there. And lucky that I might find, I happened to keep reviewing that book and speaking about the book, what Chandran Devanesen was saying, and 3 or 4 occasions, once in Loyola College also, I was able to read. And they said, you have given a very nice introduction. We'd like to buy that book after that, after the introduction. So that was an important connection I found between what ma'am said and the lecture that we had. The next thing I would like to say is, of course, I remember, I am very fond of this quote. Since the time I came across it, or I began remembering it a few years back onwards, about Gandhi. Gandhi said he met 3 people when he came here. I think probably ma'am mentioned it. So he first meets Firuzshah Mehta. He said he was a towering figure like the Himalayas. I cannot scale the heights of the Himalayas. Then he said, I met Tilak. He mentions where he meets and all that, probably once in Banaras and all. Yeah, I meet Tilak. Tilak like a ocean, vast ocean, too difficult to measure the depths of it. The regard that he had, irrespective of the methods or whatever they may find. And then he meets Gokhale, and he says, he was like the refreshing spring. I must have told my classes. He is like a refreshing spring of the Ganges water. I could take a dip in it, and I can enjoy and I can imbibe the essence of what it has to say. Similarly, if I have to say about both of them in terms of what they are like the refreshing spring with whom we can approach and really imbibe all that they have to offer. That's the kind of approachability and friendliness they have in taking education, in taking history to the students, and to the and to the anybody who was meeting. Thank you, sir, for that wonderful opportunity you gave me. I remember it. I wanted to say the initial stage, but unfortunately, the other official things I missed it. Here now, before proceeding further, I would like to say a few words about Dr. Chiranjeevi J. Nirmal, in whose memory this endowment has been instituted. I'm taken a lot of help. This is an extract I had actually got from Professor Varnava sir before itself. So I would like to read a few things from it. I think he has brought it out and elaborated it in a new book that is going to be published or is published recently. He has written a chapter on it. Dr. C.J. Nirmal was born on November 26, 1934 in Guntur to Dalavayi Theophilus Chiranjeevi, the first Indian principal of Western College, and Dr. Louisa, a women medical officer. Dr. C.J. Nirmal was affectionately called as Dr. C.J.N. He had his early education in various schools in the then undivided Madras Presidency, the Children's Garden School, Church Park, Besant Theosophical and Kellett schools. Finishing intermediate at Loyola College, Chennai, he had his honors in history from the Presidency College, Chennai. After a year of research studentship in the University of Madras, he joined the staff of Madras Christian College when Dr. Alexander Boyd was the principal. He taught at MCC from 1956 to November 1992, with a break of 3 years between 1963, among which was 1963-64. He was a Fulbright Smith Munch Scholar at the University of Pennsylvania, USA, and was a full-time regional director with the United States Educational Foundation in India in the Chennai Consulate during 83 to 85. He was awarded PhD degree by the University of Madras for his thesis, A History of Public Health in Madras Presidency. He introduced new courses in the 80s and 90s, such as the press, film, national security, Indians abroad, civil services in India, Indian art, etc. He was a pioneer to introduce the history of South India, history of Tamil Nadu, and history of Madras. During his academic career, he guided more than 20 PhDs and 70 MPhil scholars, leading them to new frontiers. His ardent humanism and a keen sense of spirit of the times found reflection in the syllabus on human rights drafted by him and adopted by the Bharatiya University, the first of its kind in India. Madras Perspectives was the theme of the prestigious William Mayer Endowment Lectures of the Madras University. An institutional builder, he established the Institute of Indian and International Studies, of which Dr. Sarvapalli Gopal was a honorary president and Dr. C.J.N. was the director. After his retirement, Dr. C.J.N. was invited as visiting professor to the Mononmaniam Sundaranar University, Tirunelveli, and he also guided research students at the Center for Research on New International Economic Order, CRANEO, at Chennai. His publications range over 19th and 20th century Indian and American studies, gender discontent and human rights. His books include 19th Century Press and Indian Nationalism, Madras Perspectives, Julian Danvers' The Map of India, Human Rights in India, Imaging the World, the Bible Society of India. Apart from writing, he continued to address the various forums, including the South Indian History Congress, Tamil Nadu History Congress, highlighting the importance of history. Dr. C.J.N. was a bibliophile and had collected more than 1 lakh of books during his lifetime. After a lifetime of contribution to education and research, he reached the eternal abode in 2019. A historian par excellence, he was most widely recognized for his contributions to research in Madras University area, which then included much of South India. He has molded the scholarship and career of many students, and during visits to other states in South, one cannot fail to notice the reverence and warmth of his students and others associated in some capacity with him when we mention his name, not to mention of Tamil Nadu alone. It is celebrating his contribution, celebrating his life, that we are having this lecture today. And this was instituted by the initiative of Dr. C. Joseph Barnabas, formerly Associate Professor of History in our department. Through his indefatigable and resolute efforts, this was possible, and the support of several of his students and alumni of MCC, some of whom have graced this occasion today for us. It's a great honor for us to have all of you alumni here, all of friends of the college who had been a great source of support for past several many years, and continue. We rely on you in future years too. We express our gratitude and thanks to Dr. C. Joseph Barnabas, students of Dr. C. J. Nirmal, alumni, friends, and well-wishers for the immeasurable support in keeping alive the memory of Dr. C. J. N., who towered over others in his lifetime through his academic endeavor. With these words, I once again welcome you all for the endowment lecture. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for these insightful words. I now invite Ms. E. Niveda of 2nd MA History to formally introduce our esteemed speaker for today.
Good afternoon to everyone present here. It is an honor to introduce the speaker of the day, Aditya Mukherjee sir, who is the professor of contemporary Indian history at Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, where he taught for more than 40 years. He was dean for the School of Social Sciences at JNU, director of the Jawaharlal Nehru Institute of Advanced Studies at JNU, the sessional president of Indian History Congress of Modern India in 2007, and the general president of the Indian History Congress from 2023 to 2024. He has also been the visiting professor at Duke University, USA, La Sapienza, University of Rome, Italy, Institutes of Advanced Study at University of Sao Paulo, Brazil, University of Tokyo, Japan, Institute of Advanced Studies at Nantes, France, and the Institute of Advanced Studies at Lancaster, UK. He has authored many books, including Political Economy of Colonial and Post-Colonial India in 2022, Imperialism, Nationalism, and the Making of Indian Capitalist Class in 2002. His latest book is Nehru's India, Past, Present, and Future in 2024. He has also co-authored 3 best-selling books, which includes India's Struggle for Independence, India Since Independence, as well as RSS School Text and the Murder of Mahatma Gandhi, the Hindu Communal Project. These books have been translated into several languages, and some of them have also sold more than 500,000 copies. He has edited a centenary history of the Indian National Congress from 1964 to 1984, Volume 5, and Congress and the Making of the Indian Nation, 2 volumes in 2011. He is also the editor of Sage series in Modern Indian History, which has so far published 18 monographs from 2000 to 2016. The series is now continuing with the Penguin publication as the Penguin series in Modern Indian History. He has published more than 50 articles in reputed journals and edited volumes, and also delivered more than 80 lectures and seminars all over the world outside India. We, as the Department of History, we honorably welcome you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Niveda, for the detailed introduction. We now come to the most awaited section of today's program. It is with great honor that I invite Professor Aditya Mukherjee to deliver the endowment lecture.
Thank you for introducing me so generously. I'd like to thank, I don't know what to call him, my student or my friend, Dr. Venkataramanujan, for making it possible to come once again to this very fine institution and talk to the faculty present here, a very fine faculty, as we have for a long time to come, from CJN to the current, and always a very bright, inquisitive bunch of students. What impresses me most is that most of them are girls. We were very proud when JNU crossed the barrier and majority of the students in JNU became girls. Earlier we used to give a preference of a few marks so that more and more women came in, and over time the boys started demanding that now you have to give us marks because the women dominate the campus. But talking of JNU, and Venkat will remember, we are used to having 2-hour classes, huh? Which some of us often would take it into 3 hours. This is not to scare you. I'm not going to do anything of the kind, but bear with me for a little while. My talk is on the historical roots of India's development strategy. And as I was introduced, I am a professor of contemporary history. Now I can quite imagine the young people here saying, what a contradiction in terms, I mean, how can it be history and how can it be contemporary? Isn't it? And what is contemporary history? Is there a date? I mean, you can say that medieval period, even that you can't say. Now you say late medieval, early modern, because it's so difficult to periodize, right? But when does modern start? You know, I mean, suppose you say for India, modern starts in 1947. But then, how can it be a general description for the rest of the world? What is contemporary history? Now, before I start, I want to just briefly introduce the meaning of what we mean by contemporary history. The most important thing about contemporary history is that it is not defined by a period. Contemporary history is asking contemporary questions, and then going back as much as necessary in history. Let me give you 2-3 examples. I mean, suppose you were an alien and just landed on India. What are the things that will immediately, you'd notice? Poverty, isn't it? So the question that can come up is, why is India poor? Now the answer to that cannot be that Modi doesn't know economics, which perhaps he doesn't, but that is not the answer. The answer will be, when was India not poor? So it will take me at least 200 years or 250 years back. That is the end of the Mughal Empire and the coming of the British. The beginning of the 18th century, 1701, India produced 8 times the GDP of United Kingdom. So we were certainly not poor. India was the largest exporter of industrial products in the world at that time. Produced about quarter of the world's GDP. All right? So we have to explain that from that situation, why did we come into here? So a contemporary historian, therefore, will have to go back at least 200 years. Another question that might come to you is, why is India a democracy? Or almost a democracy these days? But it was certainly one of the surprises for everybody. Among the entire post-colonial world, India was probably the only example where democracy survived in its full form for decades. And again, the answer cannot be that we had, Jawaharlal and Nehru was a very democratic person. The answer to me would take me back at least to the beginning of the modern Indian national movement, in which since the 1890s at least, if not before, democracy was a seminal part of the imagination of India, of the nationalist leaders at that time. But others have taken it much more. And this is another aspect of history as well as contemporary history, that it must be multidisciplinary. Since it's a meeting of primarily historians, but I learned a lot of people from other disciplines are also here. But certainly to young people who are doing history, I would like to remind them that they are not doing history because nothing else was available, or that you didn't get enough marks to do commerce. But you're doing history because it has been called the master discipline, the queen of the humanities. If you read E.P. Thompson, he wrote a very famous book called on philosophy, in which he describes history as the master discipline on the ground that it is one discipline which must encompass every other discipline. You see, and the contrast is, let's say, with economics. An economist makes assumptions. An economist famously will say that assuming there is no political disorder, assuming there is no climatic change, and like that, assuming there is no basic shift in technology, Then, if I increase the input of amount of capital, what would be the impact on labor? Now, a historian can't do that. You cannot assume away anything from climate to history to politics to sociology to psychology to genetics now, to linguistics, all those disciplines. The more you bring in, the greater your understanding, right? So what does a person like Amartya Sen, who by training is an economist, but is equally well known as a philosopher, and is also a Sanskrit Pandit, he knows Sanskrit very well, and he tries to answer this question that why has India survived as a democracy, and he takes it back to ancient India. In the same manner that Jawaharlal Nehru in the discovery of India traces back some of the critical elements of a democracy, which is, as Mridula was saying, as she quoted Gandhiji, respect for the opposition, a dialogical tradition. Amartya Sen said that the dialogical tradition goes back to the ancient Indian past. He starts from the original Rig Veda hymn, where, you know, God can be seen in multiple forms or not there at all. He says on the basis of his learning of Sanskrit that if you compare it with any other classical language, Greek, Latin, etc., you find the maximum amount of questioning is in Sanskrit. You know, there is no, this dialogical tradition of dialogue, of living with difference is the heart of democracy, and he says that we have borrowed from that. And I think he's absolutely right. This is what Nehru also says, that the national movement draws on the civilizational history of our country to bring in the ideas of democracy. Now this is just to introduce that it is going to be therefore a multidisciplinary talk. We are going to try and draw from politics, economics, etc., to make some points about the economic strategy that India adopted since independence. It is also to suggest why this rare species of contemporary historians should not be extinguished. What is it that we have to contribute? Why should a historian be talking about planning and development and things like that? I hope one is able to demonstrate that. Now, what is unique about India's development strategy? What is different about India's development strategy since independence, unlike other post-colonial countries? The two things that would strike you is that India had a development strategy which was both democratic on the one hand and was independent. That is, it did not occur under a framework of being a junior partner to any major superpower. If you look at all the countries that developed since the Second World War, you will find that they fall either into the category of a country which has quick development with an authoritarian regime, or in the category of quick development as the junior partner of the United States or some similar other superpower. Now, India doesn't adopt either of the two. Why was it so? Why is it that India had this development strategy? It is not because, as you must have heard every day in the newspapers and the posters you see, it is not because we are a Vishwaguru. It is not because we are mother of democracy. It is for something quite different. And that is what I am going to talk about. It is not because we knew everything in ancient India, as you know. Didn't we know everything in ancient India? Otherwise, how did Ganesha get his elephant trunk? Somebody very important said he got it because of plastic surgery, no? Another very important person, the governor of Bengal, while inaugurating an engineering fair, said when Arjun fired his arrow, there was a nuclear bomb in front of it. He had a nuclear tipped arrow. And such was his brilliance that he was made the vice president of our country, right? Now, that's why, as Mridula was saying, that we historians have to fight to keep our job, you know, because they all know everything from ancient past till now. So, the question therefore is, why did India succeed in having a strategy which was different from the others? And the answer to that is something that economists or non-historians often neglect, which is that the nature of a state is the product of the movement which creates the state. So if you are going to characterize a state, characterize a government, or characterize its policies, you have to look at what is the movement which has created them. To give you an example, the Soviet Union is formed as a result of the Bolshevik Revolution, right? Now, at the end of the Bolshevik Revolution, which, as you know, was based on the idea of the dictatorship of the working class, etc., you could not have a bourgeois democratic state. Or, an even clearer example, Pakistan is formed on the basis of Islam in danger, on a sole basis of religion being the driving force. Now, once Pakistan was formed, Jinnah gives this famous speech that now that we have Pakistan, we will be a secular democratic country. Could that happen? It didn't happen. His speech was drowned in blood. So you cannot ride a tiger and then suddenly say, yeah, okay, bye-bye, I'm taking a break. So what was it about the Indian national movement which had critical impact on the nature of the development strategy we had immediately after independence, and I'll argue even till today? The reason why we need to go back to the movement, I'll give you a very telling example. One of the most quoted economists, one of the most brilliant economists also as well, A.M. Khusro, he was vice chancellor, he was the member of the planning commission, he was the director of the National Council of for NCAER, etc., etc. And he's probably the most quoted economist when anybody wants to write about land reforms in India. And he makes the following statement. I'm quoting him. He makes this, to me, an astounding statement that the elaborately conceived and many-sided program of land reforms launched in the country during the 1950s could be said in a considerable degree to be a gift of the administration to the peasantry. It is a fact that there were some very bright bureaucrats who contributed to the implementation of the land reforms. But to say the land reform was a gift of the administration to the peasantry ignores 100 years of struggle that went in. The fact that in India you could have land reforms without having to kill millions of people as in the Soviet Union. The entire kulaks had to be murdered, right? Or with General MacArthur's army sitting there as in Japan. That is land reforms by force. We had a democratic land reforms. It was possible because a nearly 100-year struggle of the Indian peasantry had changed the class balance so much that land reforms became possible. You could, in many parts of wherever the peasant movement was strong, very strong, the land reforms occurred virtually without any compensation to the zamindars, or very minor. Where it was weak, it took a very, very long time, with lots of court cases, this, that, and the other. In other words, without an understanding of history, you cannot even begin to discuss why and how land reforms and why it was successful in, let's say, in Jammu and Kashmir. The best land reforms, by the way, was in that region, and why it was least successful or less successful in parts of Bihar. Okay. Now I'll very quickly go through some specific features of our national movement which have a bearing on the nature of the development strategy. There are two general features of the national movement which are very important. One is that it was a prolonged movement, a 100-year-long struggle. And second was it was a mass movement. What am I contrasting with? It was not a revolution done by what is quote-unquote called professional revolutionaries. It was not a coup. It was not a guerrilla movement led transformation. That is a bunch of very committed people lead to the overthrow of the state. It was a movement which involved, as Mridula's talk showed, the masses of people, ordinary people, and ordinary people over a long period of time. Which means the ideas of the movement go deep down into the minds of the people. Probably you do not get the full import of what I am saying. To explain that, I often use this term, that you cannot in India do what is called a Deng on Mao. You all know of Deng, Mao Zedong, and Deng brings in a complete shift. After Mao dies, Deng says his famous statement that I don't care what is the color of the cat so long as it catches mice. So capitalism, socialism doesn't matter. China will now follow a path of quick development. America, which was its greatest enemy, now became bosom pal. And they adopted strategies of development which were ruthless. Had nothing to do with socialism or the people at all, right? Now, you could do that in China in 78. Sudden shift from a communist state to a state which communism was only for political power. You can't do that in India. An authoritarian shift occurred in 1975 with the emergency. And the people of India would not accept an interruption in their democratic rights. And you saw how massively they voted out the regime which had introduced the emergency. I can give you another example, but that example I'll give later, which is what gives us hope. That is, the ideas of the movement go deep down and are not easily reversible. That is why I'm saying it is important till today. This is not to say that they can never be reversed. Like if the central idea of India was to be a secular democracy, it doesn't mean that today you cannot turn it around, but it is not going to be an easy task, is the point one is making, because it has gone deep down into the minds of the people. Now, what are the what are the basic ideas of the national movement which have got deep down? The basic ideas by which we mean what Rabindranath Tagore called the idea of India. The basic assumptions with which modern India was to be built. And this idea of India is one, the assumptions, the basic ideas. There was a consensus that I want to emphasize. The entire spectrum of the national movement, from the left to the right, from Dadabhai Naoroji, the moderates, the extremists, then the Gandhians, Nehruites, Subhash Bose, revolutionaries, Bhagat Singh, etc. They were all agreed on this, what I am going to just now say, the consensus view. Only people who did not agree with this idea of India were the communalists and the loyalists. All right? Now, what is this consensus view? Obviously, Gandhi, as Mridula was saying, Gandhi and the communists did not agree with each other on a whole bunch of things. But what did they agree on? What they agreed on were the following 5 things. Quickly. First and foremost, India would be a sovereign country. By sovereignty was meant anti-imperialist. And that it will support anti-imperialism globally, even after independence. Not only will it not itself become an imperial power, but it will fight imperialism anywhere. In other words, what is happening today, we collaborating virtually with Israel while it is doing the genocide of the Palestinians would be completely unacceptable to any spectrum of our national movement. Only people outside the national movement can do things like that. So one was anti-imperialism. Number 2, in other words, you can't have a development strategy which plays ball with imperialism. That's the lesson. Number 2, democracy. India will be a democracy. By democracy was meant certain elements Mridula has discussed, civil liberties, free press, etc. But adult franchise. 1890s Tilak is talking about adult franchise, which means every individual irrespective of their caste, religion, thank you so much, caste, religion, gender, ethnicity, race, will have an equal vote, right? He's talking about in 1890s. Decades before, women get a voting right in many parts of Europe. And nearly, three-quarters of a century before, in the 1960s, in the United States, they are still debating whether black can sit next to you, leave alone vote, right? So it was a revolutionary idea in the 1890s, and it was a central idea that India will be a democracy. In other words, your development strategy has to take that into account. Third was secularism. Secularism and democracy, I won't spend time on it. These two terms were used conjointly. If you look at the literature of the 30s, 40s, you will find they use the phrase secular democracy. Why? Because one can't be there without the other. You can't say I'm a democracy, but only for the Hindus. The Muslims and the Christians can take a walk. You can't do that. So secularism and democracy are necessarily conjoint phenomena, just as communalism and loyalism were conjoint. Every communalist, whether he was majority or minority, he may talk in the name of Hindu Rashtra, but they were all allying with the British. When there are questions, we'll show you that how they continue to do so even today. The NCERT has just brought out a booklet on, our Prime Minister likes to talk about the Partition Horrors Day, one day before the independence. So it is the partition horrors we are reminded of, right? So the NCERT dutifully produced a booklet on partition horrors. And what does it say? Who caused the partition? The British are let off. It's an NCERT book which says the British wanted to leave back a united India. And who's responsible? Jawaharlal Nehru and Jinnah. You won't believe it, but please look at it. The Indian History Congress had to pass a resolution, a unanimous resolution, saying this is not history. All of us have grown up understanding that this division between our people is a product of a colonial strategy of the 19th century of divide and rule. But they are saying, no, the British, they let off the British. Right? So this loyalism and communalism, as I said, were conjoint. They speak in the name of the nationalism, but their voice is that of the colonial. Colonialism and communalism are conjoint. Set it in your mind. Don't be carried away by their claim to nationalism. Anybody can claim, masquerade as a nationalist. Okay. The fourth element of the idea of India was a pro-poor orientation. I'm choosing my words carefully. Not socialist, not communist, though they were very important elements in the making of the consensus. But the consensus was pro-poor. Dadabhai Naoroji, the moderate, his first book is Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. You see R. Siddharth, Dadabhai Naoroji, Rana Dey, Srinath Banerjee, these are all the early nationalists. Their writing is centered around poverty. The reason imperialism has to be opposed is because it causes poverty. All right? Gandhiji takes it forward with the concept of Daridra Narayan. God resides in the poor. Turn your face towards the poor, as he would say. Right? Which is taken further forward by Nehru and then by the socialists and communists. But there is a consensus that you must be pro-poor. How to be pro-poor, there is a difference of opinion. But that you have to be pro-poor, there was a consensus. Again, a very important element in your development strategy. You can have strategies of development which abandons the poor, and you can have a strategies of development which are inclusive. The last element was a scientific temper. That India is not going to be based on superstition, on obscurantism, on rituals and stuff like that. Is going to be based on modern ideas of progress and science. All these ideas, these 5 elements, are there in the Indian Constitution, including scientific temper. Scientific temper is an article of the Indian Constitution. Why? Because, as I said, the Constitution is made for the new state, and the state is born out of the movement. So the Constitution is the crystallization of the movement, of the national movement. That is what your Constitution is. And that is why the communalists did not accept the Constitution or the national flag. For example, the RSS. At independence, they said, this is not our Constitution. You know, let's look at Manusmriti instead. Okay, to return to our theme now. If the strategy of development was to be one where you have to have both democracy and independence, is there any, and it had to be one, as I said, because everybody was agreed on it. Anybody who said at independence, let us have quick growth on the basis of an authoritarian regime in partnership with an industrial bourgeoisie, and then we will talk about democracy later. This is the South Korean model. Anybody who argued it would be in the dustbin of history. Nobody could argue it, not even the capitalists. The Indian capitalist in 1945 wrote the Bombay Plan, as it is called, Plan for Economic Development of India, planning for the imminent independence that is about to come. And the first assumption they make in that is that it is going to be under an independent and democratic system that the transition will occur. So across the board there was a unanimity. You couldn't possibly suggest an alternate method, or even the Japan method. Japan grew at 10% per annum from 1950 to 1970. 20 years. It was catapulted from a developing country into the second largest economy in the world. But they did it as a junior partner of the United States. Completely the base for Vietnam, with no autonomy on their military. They still don't have it. Japan even today cannot decide what their future is going to be and how they are going to do it. It is the fight. Now these two models were not acceptable to India. If it is not acceptable to India, how are you going to do it? Nehru says that we are undertaking a path, I'm quoting him, uncharted in history. No country in the world made the transition to industrialism, to capitalism, with democracy. Name me one. Think of England. Think of the Dickensian condition of the working class in England. You know, where was the question of democracy? It is, decades away. United States, with slavery. Every European country which industrialized had a colony. Every. To make it simple, I mean, you know the phrase that from the transition from feudalism to capitalism occurs with the process of what is called primitive accumulation. Now, if I to say the same thing simply, it means that if you have to industrialize, you have to invest. You need capital. Where do you get your capital from? You can't say, let me tax the corporate sector. There isn't a corporate sector. You're trying to create one, right? So where do you get your resources, initial resources? It has to come from your working class and peasantry. In Japan, there was a 50% land tax in the period that they were industrializing. In Soviet Union, there is forced collectivization. You are extracting surplus from agriculture to put it into industry. And so on and so forth. There is in England, the enclosure movements. So basically it is on the backs of the working class and the peasantry. And to the extent that you have a colony, you can extract that surplus required for investment from the colony rather than from your own working class and peasantry. Now let me give you a startling figure. 1801, when Britain is the first industrialized country in the world, right? It is the first industrialized country. 85% of their GDCF, gross domestic capital formation, in plain English, 85% of what they invested came from the surplus or tribute that they got from their colonies. So to that extent, it didn't have to be raised from the working class and peasantry, right? So this is how, in the world, the shift from the medieval to the modern, to the feudal to the capitalist system occurred. Now, in 1947, India did not have that choice. Could it have said that we will now tax the peasantry? On the contrary, if under British rule about 50% of the gross produce of the peasant went out in rent and revenue, after independence, there was zero tax on land, not even 50 paisa. Even when economists said, let us at least tax the rural rich, it never got implemented because it was impossible. If you try to do that, you will lose the next election. So there is no question of taking resources away from agriculture. On the contrary, there is actually a net transfer of income to agriculture through subsidies. Cheap diesel, cheap electricity, cheap fertilizer, etc., etc. So you can't do that. You can't do it by extracting it from your working class. If you look at the trade union movement from 1950 till recently, till we have virtually destroyed the trade union movement, but till about the 90s, if you look at, sharp rise. Working class rights increase. It's not like South Korea. 60 hours a week. 60 hours a week. And if you try to unionize, you are dead. So we didn't have those options. That is why Nehru said this is an uncharted path. So when you evaluate the Nehruvian period, do remember that what was being attempted was a unique task in world history. And it is because Nehru followed the path of a democratic path that we had another very unique result, which is we had a revolution which was not followed by a civil war. What was the French Revolution was followed by a civil war. The Russian Revolution was followed by a civil war. The Chinese Revolution was followed by something like 20 to 60 million people having to die. The Indian Revolution, which was one of the biggest revolutions of the 20th century, it changed the face of the world. Once India became independent, one after the other colonies, the traditional colonial system collapsed. So such a big event occurs. It's followed by what? The Nehruvian consensus. This is because he insisted, and I can quote him on this, that he said that democracy, I will not give up a democratic framework for anything, even if it is quick economic development, this, that, and the other. For anything, it is a non-negotiable, and that is why you had a civil war after independence. I want to make, excuse me, this is Delhi speaking. As I like to say when I come to a free part of the world, that is South India, that we come from the most polluted city environmentally and politically at the moment. When you read scholars who look at the Nehruvian period, you will read a lot of people like that. Tirthankar Roy, for example, Arvind Panagraya, professor of economics in Columbia, advisor to Mr. Narendra Modi, chief economic advisor at one point, Lord Meghnad Desai. They've all written that, that the colonial period was good, Indian industry grew. And then we had these 40 years, the Nehruvian years, were the wasted years. Again, the good days started from the structural, the economic reforms from 1991. So interim period is seen as wasted years. Now it is wrong for the following reasons. Only an economist can make statement like this, who have no sense of history, no sense of context. What do I mean by sense of context? When you evaluate somebody, like if you are trying to see whether this guy runs very fast or not, you can't put somebody 200 yards ahead of him. That is, he's 200 yards behind, and they start running and they say, he's very slow. Isn't it? In other words, in economics, this is called what are the initial conditions. Where is he starting from is what I have to see. If he's starting from somewhere which is 200 years behind somebody else, then you can't say, see, Japan is doing so well, England is doing so well, why aren't you doing very well? Now look at what India starts with. Rabindranath Tagore again. You see, literature is so important for us because they can express a reality so much easier and so perceptively than often a historian can. Tagore said that the British will have to leave India one day. This is just before his death, he wrote. But when they leave, what kind of India will they leave behind? What mud and filth will they leave behind? Now, what is this mud and filth? When India became independent, the average life expectancy, you know what that means? The number of years you're likely to live on an average was less than 30. Which means the poor must have died when they were in 5, 6, 10, whatever. The average was on less than 30. 3 million people died of just starvation 4 years before independence. 91% of the Indian women were illiterate. So you can see the catching up going on now. 84% of the Indian population was illiterate. And most of all, the British left India deeply divided. People killing each other, murdering each other. By the lakhs, 5 lakh people murdered. Okay? So you have to keep that in mind from where you start. And keeping that in mind, I will give you a brief, just to disabuse you of this notion, because these days it's a fashion to say everything wrong in the country is because of Jawaharlal Nehru. Partition of India, poverty, lack of backwardness in agriculture, lack of primary education, everything, as you know, every pothole is because Jawaharlal Nehru didn't do it well, no? So therefore, let's take a quick historical look at it. 1951 to 71, Indian industry grew at 7% per annum. Now, which is a pretty good growth rate. But the important thing about that growth was that you've heard of the Nehru Mahanobis strategy, the second plan strategy. At independence, Nehru said, we are in a neo-colonial situation. What is a neo-colonial situation? You are politically independent from a country, but economically you remain exactly dependent on the same country. So that's what neo-colonialism is all about. There are a large number of countries in the world which are in a neo-colonial situation. Totally dependent on the countries from where they became independent. That was our situation at independence. Why? At independence, we did not produce any capital goods. We did not even produce machine tools, by which I mean pliers and wrenches. 95% of our machine tools were imported. So if you want to grow, you have to invest. If you have to invest, you need machines. Where do you get the machines? Go back to the same countries from where you got independence. So this is neocolonialism. That is why the Nehru Mahanobis strategy, the heavy industry-based, public sector-based strategy that was involved. And look at the results, dramatic results. At independence, nearly 100% of the machinery had to be imported to make any investment, which means to make any growth. By 1960, it had come down to 43%. By 1974, it was only 9%. 91% of our growth we could manage on our own machinery. That is what led us to have an independent foreign policy. No amount of shouting that we are mother of democracy and Vishwaguru gives you an independent foreign policy. It is your internal economic strength, this is what is called unstructuring of colonialism. The so-called wasted 40 years were the years when Nehru unstructured the colonial structure, on the basis of which you can do what we are doing today. That is why India could lead nearly 100 countries in the world in the non-aligned movement, which said we will neither join the Soviet Union, either of the superpowers, or the United States. 100 countries. You could do that, and India was under severe attack for that reason. You could do that only if you had got your economy out of trouble, and if you had also got food security. Now that I mention food, before I come to the food part, this achievement in industry was done largely by the public sector. And I want to again mention this because there is this notion that public sectors are inefficient, they gobble up money, they are white elephants, etc., because you want to hand over everything to the private sector, because that's what makes money, isn't it? For a lot of people. In the Nehruvian period, the public sector had greater savings. That is, they were more efficient than the entire private sector. The first Hindustan machine, second Hindustan machine tools, HMT, the first Indian watches made in India were by the HMT. You don't remember, but you ask your parents, probably the first watch they wore must have been an HMT watch. The second HMT factory comes out of the savings of the first HMT company. So it is not true that public sector must necessarily be white elephants. Coming to the agriculture part, that they say that okay, Nehru developed the industries, but he ignored agriculture. Complete lie. In the Nehruvian period, 1950 to 65, Indian agriculture grew 8 times faster than what it did in the previous 50 years. Again, when you compare, either you compare with the previous period, what was it? Or you compare with what happened after that. The rate of agricultural growth under Nehru, which was about 3% per annum, has not been surpassed till today. The basis of the Green Revolution is laid in the Nehruvian period. You can't have the great Green Revolution without fertilizers, without tractors, without dams, without irrigation, right? And that basis was laid in the Nehruvian period. And you must have all heard of Daniel Thorner. All students of economic history have to read Daniel Thorner. He was a progressive economist who was thrown out of the United States under the McCarthy period, but he's one of the most well-known economists of the post-colonial world and certainly of agrarian history of India. He says the following, I'm quoting him. He says, it is often said that in the first 3 plans under Nehru, agriculture was neglected. This can't be taken seriously. In India, I'm quoting him, first 21 years of independence, there has been more has been done to foster change in agriculture, and more change has actually taken place than in the preceding 200 years. So, as I said, that these are lies that are being spread. The most important thing we must remember about the Nehruvian strategy of what he brings in this period is that he anticipates the knowledge revolution. India missed the first industrial revolution, we missed the second industrial revolution because we were a colony. We were not allowed to take advantage of the breakthroughs. Nehru was not going to let India lose out on the information technology revolution, which was yet to come. If you look at the 1950s, the first plan, second plan, you normally think of only what were called the temples of modern India, Nehru's temples of modern India, steel plants, fertilizer factories, dams, etc. No. Every scientific institution that you've heard of, every knowledge-based institution that you've heard of, IITs, IIMs, Bhabha Atomic Research Center, National Physical Laboratory, National Chemical Laboratory, National Institute of Virology, just think of anything, all created in the 50s and 60s. But not only in the scientific area, the Sahitya Kala Academy, the National School of Drama, the Sangeet Natak Academy, the National Institute of Design, the films, the FTII, the Film and Television Institute of India, all created in that period. It is because that investment was made in the 50s and 60s that you today are able to participate at whatever low level in the global industrial revolution. If you look at today's newspaper, we are claiming that we are going to be way, in the thick of the AI revolution, the artificial intelligence revolution. What are you going to be doing it on the basis of if you did not have this technical manpower that was created in this period? More than half our GDP, understand this fact, more than half our GDP is produced by the service sector. It's not your agriculture and industry. It's the service sector. And what is the service sector based on but knowledge? Our balance of payment is balanced primarily from the remittances we get from outside by exporting our knowledge, mainly through brain drain. Okay? So when one says that if only, this is again I'm quoting Panagria and such like, the neoliberal economists who dominate the picture these days, who are actually taught in universities. I wouldn't otherwise, if they were just pamphlets, I wouldn't talk about them. Thankar Roy has written the Oxford Economic History of India, which is a textbook in most universities. That their argument that if only the post-1991 economic reform strategy was adopted in the 1950s, see where we would have gone. Because we've obviously had much faster growth since 1991. But if we had adopted the Manmohan Singh strategy or 1991 strategy in 1950s, we would have been a banana republic. You know what banana republics are, right? That is a countries without any independence, totally dependent on some foreign country. So this is, when you make statements like that, it is because you have not studied history or you do not have a perspective of looking at things in a historical phenomenon. Historically, the strategy that Nehru followed in the 50s and 60s and 70s was at that time considered globally the best strategy that any country could follow. Every economist of that period, I'm just going to name you some because you would have heard or read about them in one place or another. W. Rostov, you must have heard of him. Rosenstein Rodin, Wilfred Mandom, George Rosen, Ian Little. I mean, every major economist of that period said, this is the development strategy that post-colonial countries should adopt. China's was said to be the totalitarian, authoritarian strategy. This was the democratic, independent strategy, right? You cannot become wise later and say, why did he not do it at that time? Because that was the wisdom of the time. That was the best thing that you could do at that time. Very quickly to bring you will say that, I'm only talking of the Nehruvian period. You could also ask that if all was so good, in the Nehruvian period, why did we have economic reforms? Again, you need to have a sense of history for that. Why did we make the shift in 1991? And what did that shift mean? Let me quickly summarize. Not too much time, huh? All right, this will be really, really a summary. The reason why we had to shift were basically internal and external. The internal push came from the fact that too much protection to our industry meant that inefficiencies were beginning to grow. You know how protection can create inefficiency? Like you could not import cars, right? Or 300% duty or 500% duty, which meant the same ambassador was brought out every year with a different light, sometimes round, sometimes square, sometimes nothing changed. And people in my generation used to say, you know, I am riding a Second World War bike. This Royal Enfield that you see around is not the Royal Enfield that used to be run around. This is now totally modified. They said, look at my bike, you know, it is second. They actually put up ambassadors in museums in the world to say, "Dekho, ye, you know, 1940s ka car hai," you know. So inefficiencies came in. Inefficiency can be stopped only when you are forced into competition. That is, you open up the economy. So that was one reason why you had to open up. The other reason why it was opened up was the world situation had changed. The nature of world capitalism had changed. There was a possibility now. There was an external pull towards opening up. There was a possibility now in participating in the world trade for the third world, which was not possible earlier. It was called export pessimism. You could not export manufactured goods to the first world. But by the 70s and 80s, the situation changed. The so-called East Asian miracle, the countries in East Asia were able to double their exports of manufactured goods to the first world. So in other words, a new situation had emerged. This is, if you want to read about it, there are two very good places. One is the absolutely essential book by Eric Hobsbawm. You've heard of Hobsbawm, probably one of the world's greatest historians. He wrote this series called Age of Revolution, Age of Capital, Age of Empire, and the last one is called Age of Extremes, the Short 20th Century. It's a history of the 20th century, where he describes the shift in capitalism that occurs in this period, where now capital, foreign capital was coming in not to penetrate and necessarily lead to underdevelopment, but it was, you could now have in independent economies now could bring in foreign capital, which led to the multiplier effect of the foreign capital coming to the country where it went. Too complicated? Let me give you an example. In the colonial period, if the British invested, let's say, £1 million in Indian railways, the entire £1 million would be spent in England, because we did not make the steel, we did not make the locomotives, we did not make the wagons, etc. So only notionally the capital is being invested in India, but actually it is going right back. This is why this is meant, is that the multiplier effect of the investment is going back to England. The backward linkage. And the forward linkage, what is the railways doing? It is helping British goods to come in. So both the backward and forward linkage of foreign capital used to be something which suited the metropolitan country. Now it is not so. You can, more Toyota cars are produced outside Japan than in Japan. That is, if you bring in a foreign investor like Suzuki, for example, you can insist that the car will be over time produced almost entirely in India. So the multiplier comes in. So lots of changes like these had occurred, and therefore the consensus shifted from the Nehruvian consensus of one kind of strategy of development. A new consensus for economic reforms came in. From the right to the left, including communist parties, were doing the same thing. China was also doing the same. West Bengal government was also doing the same, inviting more foreign capital and opening up to the world, etc. I will end with this. the shift in strategy was not a shift in goals necessarily. The shift in the 1991 strategy was not a shift of giving up self-reliance and or giving up equity, giving up the poor. That it was not so. And it can be shown to be so. The poverty actually declined in the post-1991 period initially, and our capacity to bargaining power with the world increased. Bargaining power with the world is, for example, measured very simply by what is called the debt service ratio. What is a debt service ratio? A country which is going into a debt trap. You know what a debt trap is? You borrowed so much that you have to pay so much that all your earnings, anything that you earn through export, you have to now pay as interest. That's a debt trap, right? Now, debt service ratio measures the amount you have to pay out as a proportion of the earnings that you have. All right. Now, it was 35% in 90. 35% of what India earned as foreign exchange had to be paid out for debt. It got reduced to 6% by 2004. So opening up doesn't necessarily mean that you get swallowed into the globalization process and become a third-rate country. No, it cannot, it need not be. And this is what I want to end with. In 1990s, after the economic reforms came, Cardozo, you've heard of Cardozo? Cardozo was the president of Brazil. He was the president of Brazil, which brought Brazil out of military dictatorship and a protected economy to the globalization process and a democracy. Cardozo, like Manmohan Singh, was a professor. Manmohan Singh was not known to be a professor of the left. Right? He was a liberal thinker, very bright scholar, but he was not certainly leftist. Cardozo was a Marxist. He was among the leaders of what is called the left dependency theory, which emerged in Latin America. So Cardozo came to India and he met a group of intellectuals, and Mridula and I happened to be also there. So I can tell you exactly what happened. So people said, Professor Cardozo, you are a Marxist. How could you lead Brazil into this globalization process? So his answer was very brilliant, I think, and I have used it in our writing. He said, you are asking me the wrong question. Globalization, he said, has now become a fact. There is no more an iron curtain or a bamboo curtain. Those days are gone. Soviet Union has collapsed. China is now chasing capitalism faster than the capitalist countries. So where is the globalization, he says, has become a fact. If you don't participate, you will become a Myanmar. You want to? The question you should ask as a radical, as a progressive is, how do I globalize? Not whether I globalize or not. Globalize you have to. Question is, how do I globalize? And there you must find out whether I globalize by losing my sovereignty, disappearing into the armpit of the United States. Is that how I globalize? Or do I globalize with my sovereignty intact, number one. Second point you have to remember is, do I globalize with a safety net for the poor, or do I globalize by abandoning the poor? Because as you know, globalization requires structural adjustment, which basically means that your budget has to be balanced. Which means either you cut subsidy for the poor or you increase tax. There are only two ways of raising revenues, no? So that's what he's saying, that you have to choose. Will you globalize with your sovereignty intact and a safety net for the poor or not? And then he said, and this is where history, politics, everything comes in together. He said India has an advantage over Brazil. And we with our colonized minds think that we never can have an advantage, isn't it? So everybody said, what advantage does India have? He said, your advantage is that you come from the land of Gandhi. You come from a land where people have insisted on democracy. You have a democratic tradition, and your people will not accept a globalization process where you sell the country or whether you abandon the poor. Prophetic words. 1991, 90s, he's saying this. Immediately when economic reforms start, all the civil society movements come up. Right to information, right to food, everybody, the press is full of it. What will happen to the poor? What will happen to the poor? Are you selling out to the Americans? Is this Washington selling out to Washington consensus? So our democracy ensured in the economic reforms period, every right-based law that we have today was implemented. Right to information, right to food, right to education, and most important, right to employment, correctly named after Mahatma Gandhi, and this current regime has removed his name. It is Ramji Ram or something, huh? not Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. So these are prophetic words. And I want to end with this. The critical element in Cardozo's understanding was your democracy is going to ensure that you remain sovereign and you remain pro-poor. What has happened in the last few years, decades maybe, is that our democracy has got diminished. The world does not accept us anymore as a democracy. The institutions which measure democracy, the Videm Institute of Sweden, the Freedom House of the United States, the Economist's Intelligence Unit, these are the various institutions which measure democracy. We are now described as an electoral autocracy. Having an election is not democracy. Hitler won an election. Trump won an election. And as you know, the United States is under severe threat of its democracy being undermined. All right? So we are now being categorized as a electoral autocracy. The result of it is, A, our poor have been abandoned. We tom-tom the number of billionaires we have. Adani has mines here, there, etc., etc. But do you know, more than half our children are malnourished? These are government figures, not my figures. In the hunger index, and this will surprise you, in the hunger index, we are way below sub-Saharan Africa. Bangladesh is 81, Nepal is 69, Sri Lanka is 60, and we are 111. And we say, all these Ghuspetiyas, termites will come from neighboring countries and occupy India. Why the hell should they come here? You see, they've been able to catch only 6 or 7 people so far. But this is how your media is developing. So these are ways of completely, we have allowed obscene levels of inequality. The inequality index again is studied by people like Piketty, the famous economist now, globally the most famous economist who studied equity globally, puts India at the rock bottom. You know, and there are visual images of it. Have you seen in any country during Corona, people throwing their parents or people of their family who died into the river because they don't even have the money to cremate their dear ones? That is the level to which our country was pushed. Education. The only route to social mobility now. We did studies, my own students in JNU did studies to find out and ask the poor what is poverty. Because the United Nations says poverty is how many calories you intake, what is the per capita consumption of steel, how many fans you have. So we said, why don't we ask the poor what is poverty? 100%, not a single poor person said, I am poor because I don't get enough to eat. Or I am poor because I don't have an AC. They said, I am poor. Poverty means to me that I cannot save my children from the indignity of life that I have to face. Poverty means I am not able to educate my children. This is the demand of the poor. And what have we done? Taken away education from the poor. Thousands of schools in this country are being closed. Are you aware? Thousands of them are being closed. Education is being handed over to the private sector. JNU, where Mridula and I have taught for 40 years and stayed there for another 5 years, 45 years, more than half our life we spent there. If you got admission, you were paid. I know first generation children, first generation learners whose parents were agricultural laborers or something like that, using part of the scholarship to send home, to support their families. Today, you've destroyed JNU. Deliberate effort to destroy it. My students are in jail for 5 years. Both Umar Khalid and Sharjeel Imam are my students. Sharjeel Imam is an IIT engineer who came into history because he's interested in history. They are in jail where the system has been demolished. 50 times, you will be surprised. The bail application of Umar Khalid, 50 times the judge did not appear. He doesn't come. So another date. 5 years have gone by. The bail application is not being heard 50 times. All right. So you destroy JNU. Where do you go? The only place in that region where you get a decent social science education is now Ashoka University. And you know what it costs in Ashoka? 50 lakhs for a BA. Where are our people in this? This is a training ground for a tiny minority who will do their course and then go to the United States. So we have abandoned our poor as we have increasingly abandoned our sovereignty. If you are following what the US trade deal that we've got, in other words, till today, but my last word, honestly, the hope is that the imagery or the instruments that people are using to fight the current regime are the Constitution and pictures of Gandhi, Nehru, Ambedkar. The entire CAA protest movement, I have visited, we were in many parts of the country, in Kerala, in Andhra, etc. All the protest movements were going back to our national movement. Our demand for democracy is based on the Constitution and our national movement. Our demand for secularism, for a pro-poor orientation are all based on that. And the struggle is on. It is not as if it has been won over. The only issue is that the intelligentsia, people like you, young people, must regrow a spine as they did during the days of the national movement. Ordinary people stood up and got counted, and that's what needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. That was truly enlightening, and we appreciate the clarity and depth you brought to the topic. As we approach the conclusion of this enriching academic session, I now invite Dr. K. Ashok, Associate Professor, Department of History, to deliver the vote of thanks.
It's a special privilege for me to propose the vote of thanks on this day. First, I want to thank our HOD, Dr. Venkat, for organizing this event at a very short notice and bringing Professor